Good morning and welcome to a very cold but sunny London. It was -7 when I got out this morning and hasn't got any warmer. I've got gloves on for the first time this winter, but it's sunny, so that means we can have some nice light and some good photographs. I'm going to try and walk around the city for a few hours and talk about different compositions that you can use yourself to hopefully elevate your street photography images from boring to not so boring. So we're going to start sort of Tower Hill side. We're going to work our way towards Bank because the sun is at that height where it will just be peeking through over the buildings to give some nice morning sun. And then after that, we can go from there towards the South Bank and just see what things we can find. Join me as we go around and hopefully find some good images. So my photography resolution for this year is to focus less on people and more on scenes. I already do that for the most part anyway, but taking out people entirely and still getting some good shots, like this building here has just got a slight tinge of light, and you see that chair up there on its own? Creates a nice little image with everything else in darkness and just that chair. It works quite well. I really like that. And again, not people related, but just a nice little composition with the sun and the chair just standing out there. Quite nice. But we will capture some people, more towards Bank, obviously. So we made it to Bank a little earlier than I wanted to be honest. Basically, the later you're here and the more the sun moves west, the more of the buildings get lit up. And as you can see by the buildings, they are white. They are really nice. And that is one of our first sort of composition techniques that you could talk about, really, is negative space. Creating a stark contrast between the backdrop of somebody and the outfit that people are wearing. Take this guy, for example. Dark clothing, light buildings creates a hell of a good contrast, but all of this wall is still in shadow because the sun has not come round enough. So I might have to come back here a little bit later. I might just head to Spitalfields, which is just around the corner, and come back here, give the sun a chance to move around a little bit. But you can sort of get the point. Lots of contrast just with the buildings and the people walking past. People naturally wear darker, thicker clothing in winter, and the sun being lower creates drawn out shadows, meaning there's a hell of a lot of contrast and negative space in this area specifically. Here's some examples of some negative space that I've taken previously. It doesn't have to be around Bank, but you can sort of see the idea of light and dark combining and negative space. Just round the side to where I just was, further round behind Bank. I spoke about this in a previous video, this archway, but we didn't have good light then. We do now. And you can sort of get the emphasis across that you can see a nice bit of contrast again between the walls being lit up by the sun coming from down that street to the darkness of the archway. And if you are setting up, having it a bit off center, so as they come out of the tunnel, when someone does, you've got that bit of mystery and dimension there. It could work quite well. So as usual, I get distracted when I come to Spitalfields and end up not taking any photos. Well, I haven't taken any photos yet, but I have had a good 15-minute discussion with a guy that was at one of the stalls setting up an absolutely incredible thing that I'm surprised I've never heard about before. This is a sort of like a photography initiative that's sponsored by Fuji, the RPS, all of that sort of stuff, but for homeless people. And it's an incredible thing that like I say, surprised I didn't hear about already. And they were selling prints and calendars and all that sort of stuff. And every one of the prints that get bought, the royalties go to whoever print you buy, and it's all people. And basically the initiative was these homeless people get given a disposable camera, just any cheap disposable camera, and they would go out and take a few photos and submit them. And those that get submitted obviously enter a competition, and they pick the best for the calendar. Absolutely incredible. This is a photo from the guy that I was speaking to at the stall, and I think that it's just great. It's gritty, again, disposable camera images. And yeah, look, the matching red with the post box and the red of the street sign, everything there matches. Then you got this one, which is absolutely incredible as well, taken in Hyde Park. Again, a disposable camera image, but everyone huddling under an umbrella with umbrellas around them. Absolutely incredible. And then lastly, this one, which is just lovely light, and it's something that I would take a photo of myself, just the street and people walking in the street with the street sign telling them to walk and everything like that. I had to get them, and they were like £3 for a print, and then I think I paid 12 quid for a little desktop calendar. But the calendar is called My London, and I'm telling you, because if you're ever around Spitalfields, they do this stall, and they've also got an online thing, and you can just see all the pictures that were taken, and it's an incredible cause. And they actually, you know, it's sort of what I've been telling people before, that anyone can do photography, anyone can do street photography, any kind of photography. They just need to have a little bit of drive. And the fact that it's like The Big Issue, they have that, but it's more of a creative side of things, and it's actually directly affecting those sales are directly affecting those people that took the image. It isn't like it's going to a big massive corporation, it's nothing like that. It's a great idea. I'm going to link the website and all that in the description, but if you're ever in Spitalfields, look for that stall, pick up a couple of prints or a calendar if they're still doing them, because it's mid-January. Don't think a 2025 calendar is going to be going for very long, but they do it every year. And it's such an incredible cause. It's sort of touched my heart a little bit because it's such a good idea, and I'm surprised it hasn't been done sooner, if you will. It's a great idea, and there's some great images out there as well. On the theme of contrast, like we was talking about when we was at Bank, you've also got various other types of contrast. You've got obviously the light-dark contrast with light, but you've also got the contrast like here. You've got tons of texture, tons of colour, but if someone was in a long white duster coat, for example, it's a completely different feel. The contrast of themes is also a great form of contrast. You've got the contrast of colour. So if someone's wearing red and the other person's wearing blue, or like this image I took at Covent Garden absolutely years ago, where this person's in all black and the other person's in absolutely every colour under the sun, that's a good form of contrast. Tons of contrast, but using contrast in your image is something a little bit extra, you know, something more, something that rather than just taking a photo of somebody, you've got that element around them where either the subject stands out against the backdrop or the subject stands out against what's around them. It's a great way of making your image a little bit more interesting. This is a great backdrop for someone that isn't in a flamboyant outfit, and it's right behind Spitalfields Market towards Brick Lane. So again, you come away from somewhere that's almost at the financial district of London to here. There's a nice contrast. If you can get someone from that financial district in this area, nice contrast to be made in the image. So the reason I actually wanted to venture down to Brick Lane was not only come out of my comfort zone when it comes to street photography, but to also show you how using colour in your image, and sometimes the overwhelming amounts of colour, can make your image interesting. Rather than taking a photo of someone in a colourful outfit with nothing else going on, putting them against a backdrop of something that Brick Lane has in abundance, graffiti, can create something rather interesting. In the same way that having someone that doesn't have any colour surrounding colour with surrounding colour of the graffiti works, also having someone that just walked past me up against graffiti works well. The overemphasis of colour creates quite a vibrant, interesting image at times. It can be overdone. That's something you've got to be careful of. Contrast is used more widely and done right, but if you are using an overwhelming amount of colour, make it tasteful. Don't oversaturate your image if you're editing it or anything like that. Make it interesting but not over the top. Another thing when you have some sun is the joy of being able to use patches of light and the shadows of someone up against them to create a bit of mystery in your shots. You're shooting people, but you're not shooting them directly. You're shooting just their shadow. It's very similar to how you'd use this silhouette, but a little bit more dynamic, like, ooh, bit of mystery, you know? And this shot just inside of one of the exits to Bank Station is pretty perfect. You've got the light coming in from the staircase here, just as a little patch, and you come down these stairs and it's sort of isolated amongst darkness. And as someone walks past, it looks pretty nice. You just got to capture them at the right time. The closer they are to the entrance, the better, because they take up more of that patch of light. And I've talked about this untold times before. If you're photographing something with a reflective surface nearby, always attempt to work that scene and use it. You can create an interesting or a more interesting shot out of something that would otherwise be quite boring. For example, this street with the open door that says emergency exit, pretty boring scene, but you put your camera against the window here, it creates a much more interesting image. It's the same with anywhere in a city where there's some form of reflection. You're doubling things up. It makes it look a lot more interesting. Even more so in the rain. And on the topic that we mentioned earlier of not photographing people directly, if it's raining, using a reflection to capture their silhouette or their reflection, and just their reflection, not the actual person, creates a much more dynamic image. Something that would otherwise be quite boring could be something quite interesting instead, like this image I took in a rainy old London the back end of last year. So combining not capturing people directly with reflections, we've got this scene here, which is a slanted window, which can give us some cool perspective when shooting the floor. And yeah, the collage of shadows that walk past is doubled by this reflection of the dark window. There's some cool things to be had here, I think. Another technique that a lot of people use, especially in busier scenes, is a thing called blocking. And that's basically where you use a foreground element, like this bollard, for example, to block out distraction. For me, in this scene, the distraction is the distance. I want to capture something in this patch of light here. So I would use the bollard to capture my subject and block out the distraction. It's a very simple way of doing it. There's tons of different things you can use. Basically anything as a foreground element could be used to block distraction. You could even put your own arm up against the camera to block out different bits. As long as it's close enough to the camera and dark enough, then it just creates shadow and stuff. But try and use objects. The side of a wall, the corner of that construction over there, the car. Everything can be used as something as a foreground element to be blocking distraction. And it works better in busier scenes, so Piccadilly Circus, where there's construction work going on, all of that sort of stuff. If you want a cleaner image, you'd use blocking. So foreground elements are great for stuff like that. And yeah, it's a good technique to sort of add some elements to it and remove distractions from your image as well. Let's talk about framing, the next thing that can elevate your images, whether it be street photography or just in general. Framing is basically where you capture something in something. So you're basically creating an outline around your chosen subject for creating a virtual frame, if you will. So, for example, here I've got the beams going up, mirroring what the shard looks like and creating a nice frame around the shard, drawing the viewer's eye into that. But you can do that with anything. You could do that with foreground elements surrounding your subject, but you can also do it with patches of light as well. If everything else is in darkness and you've got a patch of light drawing your eye to the subject, that is also framing and a great way to isolate your subject from the background and also just make your image a little bit more stand out as opposed to nothing really going on. Next, a very broad way of doing things is also using leading lines to your subject. Whether the subject be Tower Bridge, for example, or anyone walking past, you can use foreground elements, shadow, shape, lines of any form created by poles or stuff like that to lead to your subject, and that will be your leading line. It basically draws your eye to the subject subconsciously for the most part, just by viewers of your images following the lines. That guy standing over there, for example, if you took a picture here using the foreground element of the wood here, this natural line towards the subject will be your leading line to that subject. And you could do it for literally anything. You could do shadow, you can do lines of lampposts, anything in a row that goes to your subject, basically, is how that works. Works well too. I use it without knowing I use it at this point, just naturally. And the more you use it, the more natural it becomes to use, and you naturally find that with the scenes you're composing as well. And there we go, we're basically where we started, and I've talked about a ton of different compositions and different techniques you can use to improve your compositions. Now, there are a few that I didn't mention. One of them is always playing with perspective, and I don't do it a lot, but an example of playing with perspective is this shot that I got in the British Museum in a previous video. And it's basically where you're using scale, and you're playing with scale, and again, people in the foreground, people in the background, to mess with the perspective. You might make a bird look absolutely massive and a person look tiny just by the distance between them and stuff like that. Or like I did with that shot, frame someone between someone else's legs or frame someone underneath someone. And that's sort of both perspective and framing, which we have talked about in this video. Another thing is obviously balance. As much as you can, you're going to want to try and balance your image in one way or another. Now, an image isn't outright awful if it's not balanced, but it can harmonize your image if you feel like it's a bit chaotic as a whole. Adding balance either with one person on one side of the image and one person on another, or if you've got an object or a car in one side of the frame, you might want a person on the other side just to balance it out, or a tree and a person, all that sort of stuff, just to give your image balance throughout. It doesn't feel weighted on one side. Now, I don't do that all the time, and none of these techniques should be used all the time. You should experiment and flow and do what you want to do. And if you think the image looks nice, then that's the first step. But all of these different things will help emphasize your photography, just rather than taking a picture of just someone on the street. That's where I started. I started taking photos of absolutely everything, and then using different things like framing and leading lines and all that. It helped really bring the image to life. Hopefully this video did help. If you did, a like's always appreciated. Subscribe for weekly photography videos and our travel videos that are coming up in the year. And don't forget to check out that thing that I mentioned earlier, that photography project. There is a link in the description. It is a really good thing. I've looked at those photos at least 4 times today. And yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. I'll speak to you next week. Bye bye.